Okay, so let's go over a couple of things that happened in the world of lawsuits today, or this week, and then we're going to talk to our special guest, John Howard, who is an attorney, and he's got an extremely interesting story to tell about himself and some of his accomplishments. So again, I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. Always consult with a properly licensed attorney, but John Dillon is an attorney and is ready to consult with you. John Dillon is with Dillon Law Group. He's up in North County. He covers the entire state, of course, but he's right here in San Diego. He is one of the premier Second Amendment attorneys in California, and you get the benefit of him living right here in San Diego. So if all of your legal Second Amendment causes, purposes, call John Dillon. John Dillon, 760-642-7150. Or just go to DillonLawGP.com. DillonLawGP.com. Everybody knows John. He comes to the meetings. He's given lectures before. He's the lead counsel on a few of our cases. Wonderful guy. Okay, so this week, here's what happened. First one I need you to know about is Arnold versus Kotek. And that is a Second Amendment Foundation and Gun Owners of America case, and it has to do with Oregon Measure 114. It got struck down. The question is, can Oregon require a permit and ban normal capacity magazines like we were just talking about? Measure 114 required, after it was passed, required a permit to buy a firearm, and the permit wasn't easy to get. You had to go through safety training. You had to get, you had to have proper ID, fingerprinted, background check. This was a pretty hefty permit. I mean, it was basically like getting a CCW before you could even purchase a firearm. The other thing it did is it banned magazines that held more than 10 rounds, which is we're all used to. California, we've had that on the books. We just talked about it.
So when you say that they're banned, are they banning possession as well, or just the acquisition, purchase, transfer?
The way it read is it was identical to ours.
Okay.
So you couldn't purchase them. You couldn't, could be wrong though, but the way I read it, it was a ban that looked identical to the one that we have. But here's the good news. A circuit court level judge stated that striking down the law is preventing the, quote, undue burden on gun owners to get this permit and, of course, to ban magazines. So he struck it down. Quote, gun owners, quote, have a right to lawfully possess firearms for the purposes of defending themselves and the state, which I thought was extremely tough language coming from a judge. He didn't just say, hey, gee, golly, gosh. He said, look, they have the right to defend themselves and the state. The law is against the state constitution, so is a slightly different standard than the Bruin standard, because they're not in federal court. They're just fighting back against Oregon's law and saying, hey, this is against Oregon's constitution. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different standard. There was a request for an injunction. There was an injunction, and there was a request to stay the injunction, but it was denied. And both sides are submitting their arguments, although Oregon kind of dragged their feet, and they were trying to get it delayed, which is a common tactic amongst anti-gunners. Our side, the gun owner side, the liberty side, the Second Amendment side, basically based their entire argument on the fact that, hey, it's a right. It's a right, which is exactly what they should do. The other side went with public safety, and there's an interesting point. Public safety is kind of this defense, or this, not even a defense. It's an offense tactic that the anti-gunners have started using. They started using it about 30 years ago or so, and that's how they've been attacking your Second Amendment rights, by implying or outright saying that, hey, you as a gun owner make society less safe. So they based their entire argument on public safety, but it was an interesting point in this case. It was kind of basically they said, hey, if we do all this, the public's going to be safer. And then it was basically like, okay, well then defend that. Show us how much safer would we be? How many instances would not have happened had these requirements been put in place? Well, you want to guess how many instances they came up with? 2. Dose. 2. And so even if you go nationally, they can only point to 179 in the entire nation of 350 million people. Kind of an embarrassing setback for them, and I'm sure one of the many reasons they lost. So this hearing is in an appellate court next week. So why is this important? We live in California. It doesn't really affect us. It's important because this is yet another damaging blow to these magazine bans that we're continuing to fight. In California, there's the Duncan case, and that's important. And when a judge comes out and so whether they're in our backyard or they're across the nation, when a judge comes out and says, hey, look, they have the right to own guns so that they can defend themselves against, anybody, including or defend their state. I think that's an extremely powerful statement. So that's why it's important to you. One more Carrallero, actually two more. Carrallero versus Bonta. That's one of the cases against SB2. There's a lot of pieces to SB2, but what I wanted to bring up is if you go to sdcgo.org/CCW, we have our carry guide up, and it's now incorporated all the differences with SB2. SB2 we got an injunction against about half of the expansion of the carry ban. And the other half, unfortunately, they denied the injunction, and now our carry guide reflects that. So if you want to know where you can and can't carry, many of the places you can and can't carry are up at sdcgo.org/CCW. So check it out. Lara versus Pennsylvania. That was a case involving the Second Amendment rights of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. Who were banned from carrying during a time of emergency. So if the governor of Pennsylvania said, hey, it's a state of emergency, maybe there's a bad blizzard, or maybe it was COVID, or maybe some kind of horrible emergency, then there was a regulation that kicked in that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds lost their right to bear arms. So they fought it. And they fought it on, interestingly, not just Second Amendment grounds, but 14th Amendment grounds. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 14th Amendment, that states that every American gets equal protection and that there has to be due process. Well, the argument was, of course, that, it's a Second Amendment right, but also if you're 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, these folks were not protected equally, and also there was no due process. It was just taken away from them. So again, the context of it has to do when they call an emergency, boom, 18, 19, and 20-year-old adults weren't allowed to carry. This is in the Third Circuit, and the Third Circuit actually ruled the right way.
Correct.
They said, hey, this is not. It's a
violation.
It's a violation of the Second Amendment. It's not constitutional. Pennsylvania asked the Supreme Court, can you take a look at it? And the Supreme Court kicked it back down. Basically said no, or more accurately, they said no, not right now. So it's not completely over, but the so what to you is that it further strengthens the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment's not a second-class right. If you're an adult, which right now means 18 years old or over, then it's the government's job to protect your rights, not to take them away. And then I also wanted to point, last case, the Snope versus Brown, that used to be the Bianchi case. The question there is, are semi-automatic rifles with certain features, are they allowed to be banned, or really just semi-automatic rifles in general? Maryland asked for a big extension, and here's why I included this. Maryland said, hey, okay, you're going to hear this case about semi-automatic guns, but we just need 30 more days. And FPC, this is an FPC case. FPC's attorneys said, wait a minute, they don't need 30 more days. They have been legislating the heck out of this for years. They don't need more prep work. And if you give them the 30 days, it's going to kick this thing into next year. We're going to miss a cutoff, and then you're not going to be able to hear it this year. They're just trying to play games. Interestingly enough, the Supreme Court seemed to agree. They gave them a slight extension, but it's still, all their paperwork has to be submitted before a particular date, and it wasn't 30 days. And it'll still mean that it can be heard this year.
Good.
Which is extremely important. So what's the so what here? Well, the court wants to hear this case, and they want to hear it this year. They're not allowing them to move it till next year. And I'm totally guessing here, but I think it probably has to do with the fact that there's a presidential election happening, and that they're not entirely sure what's going to happen in the election and what will happen if Harris, who's extremely anti-gun, has already made noise about wanting to change the Supreme Court's makeup. I don't think they're entirely sure. If I were to guess, I would say that there are justices on the Supreme Court right now that want this heard right now before anything happens to the Supreme Court. Now, this is just me guessing, but that's the so what. So that's what you need to know in the legal world this week. That's an update, and every week we're going to have the exact same thing. All right. Okay, so now we're going to introduce our guest, but before we do, again, we're putting the dough back in donate. Donate to California Gun Rights Foundation. That's CGF if you haven't already. Go to cagunrights.org/contribute. Make a small donation. It doesn't matter how much it is, $10, $50, $100, whatever you can afford, but reward the fine people at California Gun Rights Foundation for the work that they have done and the work that they are going to do. Also, this segment is sponsored by Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon. Go to cargostores.com or go to 423 Broadway, El Cajon. And when you go, let them know that you want to use GOR for 10% off their website. Actually, yeah, so the 10% is just for website purchase.
Or in store.
Or mention in the store. Right, thank you. So either in the store or on the website, mention GOR, Gun Owners Radio, and you'll get 10% off. Michael down at Cargo is absolutely fantastic. They make cases for guns, for watches, for drones, for all kinds of cool stuff. And then they also have cool stuff like dehydrated,
Prepper, freeze dry stuff, all the prepper dream things you could ever want. And as far as the cases go, if you have anything custom, you're mentioning specific things, guns and watches, but if you have anything, they'll custom cut your foam to fit anything you got.
There you go. Yeah. And honestly, if you're just anywhere near El Cajon, go to 423 Broadway, where the old El Cajon Gun Exchange used to be.
That's it.
Drop in and say, hey, thanks for supporting Gun Owners Radio. I just wanted to come in and say hi.
That's it. And just so that you know, when you get there, you got to hit that little doorbell button at the door. They do buzz you in. Or they will let you in. Just beware. Don't think that they're not open. They are.
Perfect.
That's it.
So a few years ago, a mutual friend introduced me to an attorney, and it's tough to tell in California, who the good ones are and who maybe aren't. I had lunch with John Howard, and I was absolutely blown away by his views on liberty, on his views on law, and the responsibility that comes with being an attorney. And I've been so impressed by so much of what he's done in his career and what he continues to do and all the help that he's given San Diego County gun owners. And there's a bunch we're going to talk about, but one piece of his career in particular is something I want to emphasize, and we'll talk about it. So welcome, John Howard. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're an attorney, and you're a local San Diego guy too, right?
Well, I actually grew up in Virginia, but my father was in the Navy, so we kind of went all over the place.
Oh, okay. How long have you been in San Diego?
Oh, God, I don't want to tell you because that tells you how old I am.
I was going to say, you've been here a long time.
Oh, yeah. No, I came back out here to go to college, and that was...
a few years ago.
A few years ago.
You've seen a lot. Let's just put it this way. I've seen a lot of changes in Mission Valley.
I've seen a lot of changes in Mission Valley, and I was, just to date myself a little bit more, I was in the second real class at UCSD.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's impressive. I didn't know that.
So that was,
just out of curiosity, because I love San Diego. I moved here when I was 21. It was 97, and I felt like a lot of changes had just been made. They had just built the gas lamp, and it felt like I could see the difference between what was and what could be, or what was about to be, or what was happening. What's some of the big changes that you've noticed about San Diego that make it totally different now than it was when you were first here?
When I was a kid, it was really like a little town, and it was very compact. They had just built Mission Valley Center, and most of the shopping was still happening downtown, and you couldn't go downtown without running into somebody you knew, but that's where the main stores were. Mission Valley Center was something really new and modern at the time.
Yeah.
And the place had a sort of a feel of a really small Midwestern town in many respects. So that was it's now obviously really changed. At the time I came here in junior high school, it was going through really bad economic times. There was a Time magazine article said "Bust City USA," meaning San Diego.
Oh, geez.
So it was really having some problems, and it was. You know, the population has changed quite a lot. The politics have changed quite a lot. Back in the 60s, it was extremely conservative. I think pretty much everybody, well, not everybody, on the city council was a Republican. Although the mayor, I think Frank Kern, was a Democrat, and as was Charlie Dale, I think. But it was, you know, the most powerful politician at the time was a guy named Bob Wilson, who was a congressman and was congressman here for a long, long time. Growth. I mean, there was at that time the first high rise I think in downtown was the Home Tower.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I mean,
Downtown's changed a lot.
Downtown looks like a city now.
Yeah, well, it looks like a city, and then you know, it's not only it's news. The homeless population is just absolutely exploded.
You know, back then it was clean.
Yeah.
You felt safe anytime you went downtown. A little bit below Broadway could get a little rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that to be true when I was in college. I worked at a pizza place called Caruso's, which at that time was pretty legendary. And it was owned by a guy named Roberto Di Filippi, who was of the Filippi family.
Yeah.
And he had started the butcher shop. He was
Really?
Yeah.
That's the same guy, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a very interesting guy.
That's interesting.
Roberto was a very interesting man.
Well, the butcher shop used to be a whole lot more interesting, my understanding.
The butcher shop
It's
was
still delicious, but it used to be there was a whole thing going on.
Yeah, well, when it was in a hotel down in Mission Valley, I mean, it wasn't the food wasn't the only thing on the menu.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Later, of course, when I was a counsel for one of the large companies here, we had to negotiate with the Teamsters Union, who always wanted to go to the butcher shop and have a whiskey or two when we were talking about union contracts.
So funny.
So it was.
Times have changed. So what got you into law? What sparked your interest to get into law?
Interesting question. I mean, actually, the reason I believe the highest human value is freedom, individual liberty. And my feeling was I wanted to be in a profession that could advance that. I wanted to, because I believe the way you secure freedom is through justice, I wanted to be involved with the doing of justice. And frankly, that still drives me. I mean, every case we take, even if it is just a business dispute, there's justice involved.
Yeah.
There's justice involved with making sure that people don't take advantage of other people, that make sure that when people do that kind of thing or injure somebody or try to take away their rights as they have in the last several years, that there's somebody there to be able to go to court and do something to stop it. And so my feeling was that was a calling that I really wanted to be involved with.
That idea really resonated with me when you and I first spoke, that basically the idea of, and these are my words, not yours, but the idea of bullying bullies is something that I really like. It's something I did a lot when I was a kid. I wasn't a bully unless there was a bully to be bullied. And a lot of the things we do with San Diego County gun owners, I feel it's the same way. It's a community of people who are just minding our own business, just executing our Second Amendment rights. And you got a bunch of people with power who are coming after us and, you know, belittling us and marginalizing us and restricting us and blaming us, and the ability to go after them, whether it's at the ballot box or with an attorney in a lawsuit, you know, it's extremely powerful, or in the media, you know, and basically say, hey, look, you know, lay off. It's you know, stop attacking them, you know, and going after them. But that bullying the bully, that resonated with me a lot, and I can't tell you how much respect I have for you for it.
Well, you know, I've got to tell you, my view is this: that our nation was founded on the concept. And first of all, it was the only nation that was founded on a concept in the history of mankind. But our nation was founded on the concept that there was one legitimate primary purpose for government, and that is to protect the rights of the people, to protect freedom, not do things for them, but to protect them. And when you get away from that, start doing things for them instead of protecting them, and in fact, while doing things for them, you're taking away their freedom, then it's not legitimate governing.
So how do you feel that you are unique in your field, or do you think that most attorneys see along the same lines as you do?
God, I hope I'm not unique. I know I'm not unique because my law partners are certainly of the same mind. We all believe in the same kind of ethic and the same kind of goal. Are there a lot of lawyers who feel that way? I think there are. I do think there is probably a good percentage of lawyers who see this as a good way to make a living, which it can be, but also see it as something of a game of chess that they enjoy doing. So I don't take that away from them. But I don't think they do the same calculus, many of them. Do they ask whether or not it's actually just and what we're doing is just? Or is it just I'm going to get a fee for representing a client vigorously? It's hard for me to judge people on that basis, judge lawyers on that basis. But I think most lawyers actually do care about actually doing justice and making sure that it's done.
Well, there was definitely a time.
Unless they work for the government, in which case it's a little bit of a different.
That level of passion's pretty obvious though when you watch them work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a time I needed help. We've been trying to get these gun shows back to San Diego, and we found a venue in the city of San Diego, and the city was not cooperating. In fact, they were working against us, and I called you up and I said, John, I need help. I'm trying to get this done. And you said, great. And you had the city and myself come down to your boardroom in your law firm, and you got us all taken care of. And you wrote a letter to the FFLs saying, hey guys, these are the expectations. This is what's going on. This is how we can do this. You made it possible so that we could have a gun show, and you didn't ask for anything in return. And I appreciate you doing that so much. I mean, there were a lot of people that pitched in, but we couldn't have done it without each cog in the wheel. And you're an extremely important cog in that wheel. And again, it was very much a matter of, a much bigger entity with a lot more power trying to step on us. And you stepped up and said, hey, you know what? This isn't going to happen. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen. Why was that important to you? Why was it important for you to step up and help?
Well, it was my honor that you even asked, frankly. It's nice when people believe in what you do enough to trust you with their rights. But that's what this was about. This was about your right. This was about freedom again. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, assuming that most people know what records are and that they sometimes break. I sound like a broken record on this. This was about your freedom. It was about the gun owners' freedom. It was not just about San Diego gun owners' freedom. It was also about the right of people to go and participate in something like this. That's why it was important. It's about freedom.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what you did. Now, you have a really interesting law partner. Is that the right term? He's a law partner?
He's of counsel to the firm, yeah.
Counsel to the firm. And a gentleman with a very familiar name. He's a former, I guess he's a current, in some states, he's a current candidate for president. Yeah. And that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is one of your, I saw his business card right on your desk there.
Yeah.
And how did that come to be?
I met Bobby through my partner up in Los Angeles. We have a Los Angeles office, as you know, and the Los Angeles office is run by a guy named Scott Street. Scott, I have to say, is a lot younger than I, and perhaps the finest lawyer I've ever known. The guy is unbelievable.
Wow.
He is brilliant. He's a tactician. He is he's efficient. I mean, he's an amazing guy. Interesting thing, given my background, and at some point, I think we may have talked about it at lunch. I have a very interesting sort of political odyssey that I've been through. Scott and I are good friends, colleagues, and Scott was a very active operative in the Democratic Party for years and years and years. He's run campaigns for Bobby Shriver and other Kennedy candidates. He was on the on Dick Gephardt's staff. He was a speechwriter in the Clinton White House. So Scott has been a Democrat since he was born, but Scott has, I guess, seen the light and is now still a Democrat, but again has those values that I find that not only resonate with me, but make it possible for us to work together because we have fundamental things in common. And that's one of the, so he was the one who introduced me to Bobby.
Wow.
He introduced me to Bobby.
It's a messy political world right now. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to, you can't, you know, Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative, progressive versus libertarian. It's tough to, no one fits in a box anymore.
That's true.
So it's tough to tell like who's what and what up's down, left's right, doesn't, you know.
Well, I think, you know, where I think we are in this country, we had a lot of other countries had ideological ages and may still actually, and we have had a very short one. We really didn't have an ideological age in the United States until roughly the early 50s. And now I think we're in kind of a post-ideological age. So you don't really have ideologies that are driving policy so much. You have people who are interested in different issues and different positions, but it's not informed by a kind of regular philosophy or ideology. One of the things that I found in common with Bobby, and one of the things that I find amazing about the man, first of all, he's walking history.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, first time I ever met with him, he was talking about something that something had happened in history. And he said, you know, my uncle did such and such. And I'm thinking, okay, my uncle, and I think, are you talking about John Kennedy? Who says that?
Yeah.
You know, my uncle ran a trucking firm. Was president of a trucking firm, not the president of the United States. But Bobby believes in the same fundamental values. He is a liberal. I mean, people are forgetting that. He is a liberal in the John Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy mold, however. He's a liberal who believes in individual liberty. You know, liberals used to do that. I made speeches for years when I was doing constitutional work. First Amendment constitutional work was where I started. I was making speeches to some conservative groups and saying, look, we've come pretty darn late to this fight, you know. Virtually all of the First Amendment jurisprudence was made by leftists and liberals because they believed in freedom of speech in ways that our side didn't. Well, you know, those values, that dedication to individual liberty is what informs Bobby. That's what is, and I don't mean to speak for him.
Sure.
I'm just talking about our conversations.
Sure, what you've observed.
Yeah, but his recent true passion against vaccine mandates. It's not that he's an anti-vaxxer. He's not an anti-vaxxer, but he does believe in freedom. If you want to get vaccinated, I don't care. Get vaccinated, but don't tell me I have to. And so that's where Bobby was coming from. If I want to give a message, I don't want to be censored. So, you know, it used to be that it was the liberals who said, oh, we've got to stop censorship. Now who's saying that we ought to censor people?
Well,
It's liberal.
It's the left, sure, it's Democrats. I don't think his views, I think if you sat down, if a third party sat down and analyzed his views and compared them to his dad, his uncle, you know, Robert F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, if you compared the two, I think they're pretty lockstep. They appear to be right in line with each other. And I also think that, you know, RFK and JFK wouldn't even recognize the modern Democratic Party.
No. Well, actually, and it's interesting. I've heard an awful lot of Republicans say, and conservatives especially, oh, look, if John Kennedy were alive today, he'd be a conservative. And I always gave that sort of, yeah, you don't really know. But when Bobby Kennedy said that to me, I thought, oh, well, okay. I can't think of a better source of information on that topic. Yeah. You know, he's a good man, and he's incredibly brilliant. So, you know, just
tell us more. What's your favorite story about him?
I think I just told you.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the fact that when in casual conversation, he refers to his uncle and his father, and he's talking about people who are iconic historical American figures. He is, he gets very intense when he starts talking about freedom and the American system. What I would recommend anybody who's interested in the guy, get his book American Values. It's a family memoir, and it tells an awful lot of family history. But it's an amazing book, and it really does tell you where he's coming from. He also has another book called A Letter to Liberals. It's a very short book, basically saying, guys, you got to stop censorship.
Wow.
You've got to stop trying to shut down what you were calling misinformation, because it turns out that an awful lot of the misinformation actually was correct information. And so he's got an active mind and a well thought out political view. I will tell you something. I think probably on issues, we disagree on a number of things. We disagree on some environmental issues, for example. We disagree on some of his foreign policy ideas, because I think he is less interested in an aggressive foreign policy than I am. But our values are the same. That's the thing. I used to love liberals. I used to love disagreeing and debating with my liberal friends, because we had some things that we shared that were fundamental. So it made it okay for us to disagree on issues, and we could walk away friends, and still do.
Did it surprise you that when he left, he didn't exactly leave the race? In some states, I know he's technically still on the ballot, which sounds like a strategic thing. Sounds like he's really trying to remain on the ballot for a strategic reason. I don't know that. But were you surprised that he threw his support to Trump?
I was. To be honest, he had told me that he was going to be leaving the race. And I knew that. So I thought, okay, well, that's fine. He'll probably stay neutral. But when he came out so strongly for Trump, he didn't tell me that. I guess he wanted to make sure that word did not get out before he wanted it out. So it was kind of surprising to me. I think it is because he thinks that it's possible for somebody who would go to D.C. as president and willing to break the rules would be able to give him the opportunity to do something that would fundamentally change things. Frankly, I'd like to see him be Attorney General and start cleaning up the Justice Department, though I don't think he's a candidate for that. I think it certainly would historically resonate, since his dad was. But he...
Interesting.
I have to say, the one thing that I regret is that he didn't run for the United States Senate in California, because he would have won it in a walk.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably would have. I don't think Steve Garvey's got it. I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off.
Yeah, well, I have too many friends who are too close to him for me to offer an opinion on that.
All right, fair enough. I get it. Believe me, I understand. Yeah. So one of the reasons you were introduced to me is a big case that you were a part of and won, and the case was in favor. You were defending the San Diego Police Department against mandatory vaccines for COVID, right?
Well, I wasn't defending the department. I was defending, and we were working together with the POA. We were defending the actual cops on the street. Because the department was doing things like handing out pink slips and telling them that they were going to be fired if they didn't get vaccinated.
Right.
If you'll recall, when we had our meeting with the then chief, he said, I really did try to help him a lot. I really was behind the scenes helping. And I said, really? Well, you gave him a bunch of pink slips, and it scared the hell out of my clients. Fortunately, we won. But it was. Now, he had his hands tied. He worked for the mayor and for the city council, so he only could do so much. But no, we were representing individual cops and the POA and those people who wanted to be, who didn't want to be vaccinated. My mistake. So it's quite the opposite then, really. You were kind of going after the department, but really the city. The city. Yeah. Okay. So how did that happen? I mean, how did they find you? Who found you? Tell us the story about how that happened. Well, we did some of actually, my partner Scott and I did, and somebody else who actually brought me into this fight was a fellow by the name of George Wentz. He's a really, really talented lawyer. His firm is in New Orleans, but he lives in Sandpoint, Idaho. And he and I had worked on constitutional issues representing the state of Utah for some years. He got involved with the freedom vaccine movement and asked me to handle cases in California for them. And so I started doing a whole lot of anti-mandate litigation against any number of groups. Kaiser, for the cops in LA.
Firefighters. COVID related or pre-COVID?
No, this is all COVID related.
Okay.
Yeah, and Firefighters for Freedom was one of the first cases we filed. So we had probably 7 or 8 active cases at that time. And some of the people, and I think it was POA and some of the members, had heard about the work we had done and that we were doing it well and successfully. And they called up and said, "Hey, can you help us out?" And so we did.
Wow. Well, I got to tell you, I've been very vocal. I tend to keep my political views that aren't Second Amendment to myself for the most part, because I run a Second Amendment organization. I don't want to alienate people over another issue. I mean, I'm not perfect. I've mouthed off here and there on politics, but one where I have truly been vocal is COVID. I think the reaction to COVID is the biggest thing that's happened in my lifetime. I think it's bigger as far as the reaction and how it changed life. I think it's bigger than 9/11. I think it's bigger than Vietnam. I think it's bigger than you name it in my lifetime. Maybe the biggest thing since World War II. So it's something I've definitely talked about a lot more than I've talked about any other subject short of the Second Amendment. And the mandates, what they were doing, the way people were treated, it was horrific. And I think that it was either some people, it wasn't dramatic enough for many people. They didn't get involved enough. I think there was a lot of fear, and other people didn't quite know what to do, and they'd show up and they'd protest or they'd rally or whatever because they didn't quite know what to do. And I've also been very vocal about, I don't like rallies and protests and marches. They don't do anything for the most part. I want to get involved in elections. I want to get involved in lawsuits. I want to get involved in things that actually change public policy. So when you were watching things happen with COVID, what were your thoughts as all this was going on and happening?
Well, it's interesting. At the very, very beginning of the COVID, the great COVID panic, which I think is a media-driven and a panic, international panic that need not have happened. I said to anybody who would listen, look, I think everybody needs to take a step back. Don't panic. Take a step back and let's figure out what's going on here before we actually come up with solutions. Because if you don't know what's wrong, you don't know how to fix it. So wait until we know what's going on before you start offering fixes to something that may or may not be as serious as you think. It may be more serious than you think, but let's make sure we do first. So I was like pretty much everybody else. Unfortunately, I listened to the media and I thought, oh gosh, I guess I better get vaccinated because otherwise I'm going to die, because they tell us all we're going to die if we don't get vaccinated. And there wasn't a vaccine. And so by the time they actually developed a vaccine and deployed it at the end of 2020 and started actually in earnest getting it out to the public in early 2021, they were putting out a vaccine and having people take it that had been geared toward the Alpha variant, which by that time had pretty much passed, and the Delta variant was now predominant. So however you come down on that, and however you feel about vaccines, again, my North Star is freedom. If you want to say, really, I'm scared to death, and most people were, because they were basically being told by the media that they were going to die if they didn't. I mean, boy, we're all going to die. And then they have this miracle cure, this wonderful vaccine that's going to save you. Well, I like everybody else, I'm thinking, gee, I better do that. And I better think about that. And I better, maybe we ought to consider that. In the end, when I got called by George Wentz, I started thinking, wait a minute, they're now making people do this. That's a very different thing. If you want to do it, do it. If you're scared, do it. If you feel like it's going to help you, do it. They weren't telling us about the massive, massive, massive numbers of side effects that were going on when vaccines were being given. That was, something that I came to know when we represented federal firefighters.
How real are those side effects, and what kind of side effects are you talking about?
Well,
when I say real, how documented are they? How you know what I mean?
That's an interesting question that you asked. They have something called the VAERS report. That's a vaccine
Injury.
it's VAERS, and it's vaccine adverse events report. And the one of my firefighter clients, actually a client we're representing in Alameda County, said, well, the VAERS reports are ridiculous. They don't really tell you much. They're only reporting about 1% of the injuries. And I said, well, that sounds like an urban legend to me. Sorry, I'm not big on conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And he said, well, let me tell you why. He said, look, we're the first responders. We're the ones who have to fill out the VAERS report. He said, you know how long it takes us to do that? To fill out a report for VAERS takes us between 30 minutes and 45 minutes to do. Do you think we do it? No, we don't have time. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So let me tell you about when I first heard about adverse reactions. I asked a federal firefighter who hired us very early on, why are you so interested in this? She said, I'm a first responder. She said, the other day, and it's kind of a touching story, actually. The other day, she said, I was called because a Marine drill instructor. Now, there is nobody in the entire world in better shape than a Marine drill instructor. Had gotten the vaccine and collapsed and had a cardiac arrest. And she said it took 3 times with the paddles to get him going again. We saved his life. But that myocarditis and heart problems as a result of the vaccine are legion. So am I going to go out there and make my career talking about something like that? No, because that's more technical than I do. But that is one reason why it was really important for people to have the choice. And that's where I come in, is making sure they had the choice. People who talk an awful lot about my body, my choice, all of a sudden forgot that during the COVID crisis.
Now, did those
no longer is it my body, my choice? It's my body. Oh, your choice.
Right. Did that come up in the lawsuits? Did those adverse effects? Was that a big part of the lawsuit as you were making your way through court?
Well, actually, we wanted to, and we want to. There are several of the cases that are going back to the trial courts now. There's a little game that the government played on us, but these cases are now coming back. We have one that we argued at the Ninth Circuit, where the federal judge in L.A. dismissed our case on the first motion. So it went to the Ninth Circuit. We argued at the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit reversed, and so it's going back. It's going back more or less to the district court. Now, I say more or less, and the reason I do is because the other side has asked for an en banc hearing, which is a rehearing of the thing by more judges.
Yeah.
And the court hasn't decided whether or not it's going to grant that. If it doesn't, then we'll go back to the trial court, and then all of that's going to become relevant, and then we're going to be introducing that kind of evidence into these cases. What happens more often is that once they exhaust all of their many, many motions to dismiss or get reversed as we got them reversed. Firefighters for Freedom was a Los Angeles, all the city of LA firefighters. They lost hundreds of firefighters as a result of this. They just left, said to hell with it. I don't want to work for LA anymore. We got dismissed on the first hearing. Then we got that one reversed. So that's going back to the trial court. That's when those things will become relevant. But the game the government has played, and it's a little bit of a dirty game, is they say, and LA Unified School District tried to do this, in our case, is they delay. They try to get it dismissed. They do get it dismissed. They go up on appeal. And then once they've lost, they say, oh, well, we're going to repeal the mandate. So now it's moot. So dismiss the case because it's moot. So then you don't get the answer that you need.
Interesting.
The constitutional answer that you're entitled to. And that's problematic. Now we have, one of the things we're doing, of course, is now going back around the other side and saying, okay, fine. We can't get if the court wants to dismiss on the basis of mootness, then we can sue for damages for having done it wrong, for having fired people. San Diego PD lost all kinds of cops. This is a group of amazing people. These San Diego cops are the best in the nation, in my not so humble opinion. I guess because I don't have a lot of humble opinions. These are amazing people, and they were being abused, and hundreds of them left. We should have 2,100 cops, and that's a small number for a city of this size. We have about 1,800, and by the time this was over, we're down to about 1,200.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, that's unconscionable.
From being fired and for not having the vaccine and.
Well, they didn't get fired. They actually just left because they said, "I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go to El Cajon. I'm going to go to Oceanside. I'm going to go to exactly." And
the reason
the sheriff's department.
The reason I bring up I think it's an important point to make that. Even if it wasn't dangerous, let's say that it was 100% safe. It's still a mandate, it doesn't matter, I guess is what I'm saying. If you're being forced to take something, to put something in your body like that, even if you had 1,000 respected doctors saying it is 100% completely safe, it's still not right. And I think that was really, to me, that was kind of the point of the thing. I remember being interviewed by KPBS. And, they said, well, gee, you're afraid of this vaccine. I said, I'm sure it's perfectly safe. I'm not smart enough to make a decision. I'm certainly not educated enough to make a decision on whether or not it's safe. But what I'm afraid of is that it's being mandated. Mm-hmm. And that they're going to require it for me to travel and have a job or whatever. At the time, the reporter laughed at me. And then it was just months later when, people were losing their jobs and not being able to travel because they didn't have the vaccine. But I think, to me, it was important that it's not about whether it's safe or even whether or not it works. It's just the fact that they're mandating this thing, and it was so truly offensive to me.
And to me, I mean, you think about the difference between this. When people, there has now been a controversy for 50 years about abortion. To me, it appears that it's a little difficult. You say, okay, here's something that you cannot do. That's one thing. How much worse is it to say, here's something you will do, whether you like it or not?
Right.
Now, the Ninth Circuit got this right when they reversed the district court in our LAUSD case, because what they said is, look, there's a constitutional right to not get treatment. So the question is, and everybody cites a case called Jacobson, which is a case that was decided in the early 1900s, long before there were levels of scrutiny, long before a lot of 14th Amendment jurisprudence, long before the right to privacy was articulated by the Supreme Court of the United States. There's a body of law that occurred since then, and in the 60s and 70s, one of them is known as Glucksberg, had to do with your right to refuse treatment. So if this is not a vaccine, and the question really is going to come down to that when we go back to the trial court, is this a vaccine? Vaccine had always been and is statutorily defined as a substance that you take that will immunize you from something.
Which this did not.
This did not. So then what is it? Well, then it's a treatment. Because they say, well, then you won't get as sick. Well, then that's a treatment. That does not prevent infection or spread. Then it's a treatment. If it's a treatment, then you're constitutionally protected from being forced to take it. Wow. That's the difference.
Now, when you went to court on behalf of these officers against the city, did they stop the mandate, or did you get a ruling, or what happened? What was the result of the case?
Well, what happened, it was a heavily litigated case.
What does that mean? It was heavily litigated.
Well, they brought every motion they could think of to get us dismissed, and they
Gotcha.
lost. So we were then going down the highway of life, doing our extensive discovery, getting lots of documents. We attempted to take the deposition of the city manager at the time. He invoked what he called the deliberative process privilege, which was completely incorrect, and we were going back to court to get the judge to force him to answer our questions. So that was where we were. We were 60 days from trial before a judge who was very interested in this case. And understand this was a bench trial because we were asking for an injunction. So her name was Catherine McCall. She's a very talented judge. And we were in court. The city said, "Well, we want to bring a motion. We want to bring a motion to dismiss." And she said, "We're 60 days from trial." And he said, "Yes, and we also want to bring a motion to stay this thing because there's another case on appeal in L.A." And she said, "I'm not going to prejudge either of those motions if you want to waste your time making them, but we'll." She said, "Have you talked to these people about settlement?" And the city said, "Absolutely, no, we're not. We're too far apart." And so she said, "The whole world's changed, sir. I think you might want to think about discussing settlement with these people."
Wow.
And that was a huge thing for her to say, knowing that she was going to be the trier of fact. She was going to be the judge.
I was going to say, telegraphing a punch is what she was doing there.
Yeah. And so the city said, "Well, she said, the whole world's changed. If I were you, I'd be talking to these people about settlement." So I went back to my office and thinking, okay, well, they're pretty stubborn people. A week later, I got a call from the city attorney's office saying, "Hey, listen, if we repeal the mandate and pay your legal fees, would that settle the case?" I said, "Well, let me think about it." I have to talk to my clients. And actually, some of my clients said, "No, we want to hear this. We want to go to trial. Let's do it." But in the end, we decided to go ahead and settle. And that is a victory.
It was a huge victory. Not only so, if you look,
They did repeal the mandate.
it repealed the mandate, and if you look at if we were to lay out a timeline of events, that was kind of the breaking point. When that mandate fell, everything else started to kind of crumble and go away. You know what I mean? Then things started to open up again. San Diego started to reopen because of the case that you won.
Well, I can't take credit for that, but what I can say is the decision did make, or the settlement did make a huge difference. It certainly did for the employees of the city of San Diego, and it certainly did for the cops. I've had more than one of the cops say, "You'd have no idea how many jobs you actually saved."
Yeah, no kidding.
And I don't know. I mean, they would know that, not me. But I'm just happy to have helped and glad that it came out well for them.
Well, what did you learn? What's something you learned from that whole situation? What's something you walked away with?
Well, I already had a huge amount of respect for these cops, but I was thanked by a whole lot of people for the work that we did. But what I would say is this: all I am is a lawyer, and nothing more. Those are the people who had the courage, not me. They're the people who put their jobs on the line. These are the people who put their retirements on the line, their careers on the line, to take a chance and stand up for freedom. All I was their implement.
Very nice.
And that was, and so I take away from that, my clients are fabulous people. My clients, if I can get them justice, they're the ones who've taken it. They're the ones who are standing up, not me.
How do you feel about the present state? I mean, we had a whole segment at the beginning of the show talking about some of the lawsuits that are happening throughout the country. And I get asked about lawsuits more than anything else, really, except for maybe how to get your CCW. Let me
ask you about that. No.
Yeah. How do you feel the legal system is going, maybe in particular when it comes to Second Amendment, or maybe the Supreme Court and its current makeup? How do you feel everything's going legally? I mean, there's new terms like lawfare being thrown around, and what's your take?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. The Supreme Court, as it is right now, is comprised of three factions. there's a liberty faction that's made up of Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch, and they believe in individual freedom as sort of the prime sort of mover of constitutional law. Then you have the corporate conservatives in Roberts and Kavanaugh and Barrett, and they're most of the time conservative. But if it comes to a question of individual liberty over, say, a corporate idea, for example, the tech industry that is censoring, they're going to side with the industry rather than the individual. And then you have the three liberals. I think the court is really terrific. I think it's very well balanced that way. I know that my liberal friends think it's awful and off the rails and all the rest of it, but if you read their opinions, especially Bruen, for example, you go back and you look at the Bruen case, you look at the Dobbs case, there's a means of analysis that this court has pioneered that's really wonderful. It's saying, okay, look, we have a constitution. It's like a contract. We all came together and said, this is what we agree on. So let's go back and see what the terms meant to those people who entered into the contract. Not what we think of the terms today, but what they thought the terms meant. So I think that's good. I have to say that in the COVID thing, and I was really quite unhappy about it, the trial courts generally were, I think, fairly gutless, with few exceptions, like our judge here, because they were also part of the panic. So instead of observing the rules that had adhered up until that time, they all of a sudden decided that they were afraid. And I don't call that corruption, but it is a kind of intellectual corruption. I think we have a bench in San Diego, in the Hall of Justice, that's among the best in the nation.
Wow.
Certainly, I think it's the best in the state, because I've litigated in LA, where I think the judges are, shall we say, generally less than adequate. And San Francisco, where the judges are really, I think, are terrific, but they're very, very intellectual. But I still believe, and I think I have to do what I do for a living, that in the end, most of the time, you can get justice done in the courts of the United States of America. We don't have a lot of corruption. There is some, but we have courts that sometimes make bad decisions, oftentimes, frankly, in some jurisdictions, like a city that will remain nameless, it's just north of here by about 100 miles, where they're making decisions on politics, and they're making decisions on conventional wisdom rather than on thinking it through. The courts of appeal are much better, because they're less driven by politics, and they're a little more dispassionate. Some of them, we've had some that have not been what we want, but and we've gotten decisions that we don't like. We certainly don't like the decisions, the recent tech decision that the Supreme Court issued, having to do with big tech saying that they can censor. And if you want to presume to be the modern town square, then you ought to act like it, and you ought to be constrained by the same rules. That's my view. And we're representing Bobby Kennedy in 3 cases on that very issue.
Well,
and he's our co-counsel in a couple of
tech
others.
censoring him as he was running for president?
Before he was running for president. But even when he was running for president, he did a fabulous speech at St. Anselm College in New Hampshire that frankly my partner Scott set up. And it was an amazing speech. And YouTube took it down. Because at some point in the speech, he talked a little bit about vaccines.
Oh, geez.
And so
it get boiled out onto that, the vaccine thing.
Yep.
I will say it appears I've made the point in the past, and I would love for you to correct me if I'm wrong. But if you look at some of the big decisions the Supreme Court has made, the Bruen decision on Second Amendment, the abortion case, getting rid of Chevron deference.
Yep.
And then you hear words like tyranny. What they tend to be, it's the opposite of tyranny. Like most of the decisions that are coming out of, especially the folks that were appointed by Trump, is the opposite of tyranny. They are decentralizing power. And I think that's nobody's perfect, no court's perfect, certainly, but at least the trend is amazing when it comes to that.
And that's one of the things that I love about, well, look, the Dobbs decision, the abortion decision was, I think, an incredibly important and interesting decision. I had been saying now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not anti-abortion. In fact, I think abortion should be legal up to a point.
So you would say you're generally pro-choice?
I'm generally pro-choice up to a point.
Okay, so a really interesting question then. An attorney, an expert in the law, who's generally pro-choice, why was that decision a good decision?
Well, Roe was completely was a terrible. I hate to say it was an abortion of a decision, but it was a terrible decision and completely wrongly decided.
Like, explain it to a layman. Like, why would someone that doesn't understand, or
Yeah, I'd be there. The Supreme. There is no enumerated right to privacy. I've been arguing about the right to privacy for 1,000 years. In fact, at some point, I'll come back on here and tell you about a conversation I had with Judge Bork about that. We argued about it for an hour in his office. There is a right to privacy in the Constitution, and it's in the 4th, 5th, 8th, and 9th Amendments. But they don't call it that, and it's because it was so fundamental. The founders never would have thought of saying, "Oh, are you kidding? We need to say there's a right to privacy?" Mm-hmm. Of course they didn't. Granting that there's a right to privacy, and believing that to be true, I don't see the connection between a right to privacy and a right to an abortion. And I don't think that's correct. So that I've been arguing that for years, and the Dobbs decision, that's exactly what they said. Yeah, there's a right to privacy. We admit that, but that there are a couple of steps missing before you get to a right to an abortion. A right to an abortion. What I think is interesting about it, and is that if you look at rights, the rights that we have, or you hear a lot of people complaining about threats to democracy. Those people who think that Trump is a threat to democracy find it remarkable that they somehow don't think that the democratic process in the states is a good idea. That's all Dobbs did. When Roe versus Wade fell down, it did not make abortion illegal, as people and some leaders in Europe seem to think. And by the way, you might find it interesting if you get online and look. Most of the European nations, Western European nations who condemned the Dobbs decision have restrictions on abortion starting at 12 to 15 weeks. Virtually every country does. And after that, you have to go to a government agency to get permission to get an abortion. That's most of them. But what the Dobbs decision did is to say, this is really a state issue, it's not a right. And so the people who care about democracy somehow don't like the idea of exercising democracy at the state level. Well, I think that's a terrific place to do it because you're closer to the legislature. Look at what's happened. You've seen legislatures like California say, boy, abortions up until a moment of birth. You have other legislatures that have virtually banned it. But it's based on the values of the people in that state and the democratic process. Some of the states who've taken pretty restrictive action against abortion have found that Republican legislators have lost their jobs as a result of that because people got mad. Ohio is a good example. So I think if you believe in the democratic process and you don't think that abortion is a constitutional right, I don't think that the court did the nation a disservice by saying, let's let the people decide. Let's let the people decide whether or not it should be legal.
Interesting.
Be curious, these people that are claiming the threat to democracy, ask them, I'm curious, what do they think democracy is?
Good question.
I think they're making a statement of which they have a misunderstanding to begin with. Because if you know the definition of democracy, that's exactly what you're describing.
Exactly right. Yep.
John, what else do you want folks to know? What else do you want them to do or know? Is there anything a reading you'd like them to do, or just get out and vote, or a website you want them to visit, or?
Oh, I'd love to get them to see them get out and vote and support the candidates that you like. I wish that people in California understood the connection between the way they live and the way they vote. Yeah. If they actually put those two together a little bit more, they might vote a little differently than they do. We've seen the results of some bad decisions in downtown San Diego, for example, that we talked about before going on the air. I think, look, we need to get back to one fundamental view, a couple of fundamental views. We respect each other, we respect each other's rights, but in the end, individual freedom is what defines us as a nation. And I'm willing to give you whatever freedom you need. Give me the same respect. And then I think we'll probably both get along a whole lot better.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Gun Owners Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, we're putting the dough back in donate. Is that a good, do you like that, Alicia? You like it?
I like it.
Okay, because I've said it a few times now, and I just kind of get this look.
Makes me think of sourdough every time you say it.
No. Put the dough back and donate. This week we're featuring California Gun Rights Foundation, CGF, California Gun Rights Foundation. They have done some excellent work. They continue to do a lot of excellent work. If you haven't made a donation, whether it's right now you're listening to the show live or you're listening to us on podcast, on whatever your favorite podcast provider is, make a contribution, make a donation right now. cagunrights.org, cagunrights.org/contribute. Give them whatever you can. $10, $50, $100, whatever you can. All right, Alicia, our next segment is Curtain Call. This is where we talk about a DGU, which is a defensive gun use that was in the news. Alicia's going to talk to us a little bit about it. This segment brought to you by Straight Shooter, straightshooter.com, straightshooter.ac, straightshooter.ac. If you have an air conditioner, if you have a heater in your house that you own, then please, please, please give them a call. They have a really cool $17.76 tune-up deal that they're doing, and they're doing it because they support Gun Owners Radio. So support them. Call them at 619-922-3937 or visit them at straightshooter.ac. The change in season also is another thing. It triggers a lot of people's allergies, and Straight Shooter can help you with your indoor air quality. So give them a call and start breathing cleaner. Call Straight Shooter and thank them for supporting us. All right, Alicia, what do you got?
All right, so well, today we have an article. It's out of Chicago, right? A self-defense use, self-defense gun use. And here's, I'm just going to give you the title. It's like it's every mom's worst nightmare. CCL holder shoots intruder trying to climb through daughter's window in South Shore.
Wow.
So this was in Chicago. So essentially what this boils down to is there was a mom. The article states that it was her birthday, and she had been out celebrating her birthday with her kids. Article does not state how many, but we know she has at least one daughter.
Gotcha.
And they had come home from the celebration, and then the daughter was in the shower, kind of getting ready to go to bed. This was around 10:45 at night. And, kind of just imagine, coming home late at night, dark, you'd been out having a great day, and daughter's in the shower, getting ready for bed. And all of a sudden, the mom states that she heard the daughter hollering that there was somebody coming in. And actually, there's a quote here. I'd like to actually just read it. It says, while she was showering, a guy put his hand through the window, and she ran out.
Jeez.
And she hollered, "Mom, somebody's coming through my room, coming through my window," said the woman. I just went into action, and when I actually saw the guy, he was still hanging on to her window, and he just looked at me and said, "I've got a gun. I'm going to shoot." I just fired and shot, is what she had stated. She said that she didn't even know that he was hit until the police came.
Wow, you're so vulnerable in the shower.
Yeah, so I mean, the good thing, that's really all the info that we have. So I'm just thankful, first of all, that the daughter was able to identify that there was a problem, was able to holler and yell that mom heard her, and that mom clearly must have had the gun either on her or within quick enough reach that she was able to acquire.
She didn't have to unlock
she
it
didn't
and
have
assemble
to
it. And
wrestle that, that cable lock.
Put
Imagine
her reading
that.
glasses on.
Right. Yeah. So the article does state that he was hit in the leg and that he limped. They have a blood trail. They followed him for 2 blocks.
Oh my God.
Which, if you think about it, the reality is it's not like in movies. In a defensive shoot, if you shoot somebody, obviously if you have a critical hit in a critical area, they can drop. However, the reality is, even if people that we have that take hits to the body, to the abdomen, different parts of the body, this particular guy was his leg, they can still be an active threat for a long duration of time after you make that hit. And I'm thankful she had that firearm.
Well,
and that she was willing and able to use it. And there's actually a further comment, but I can see that you're thinking. So I want to ask first your question before I read the rest.
All right.
Go for it.
Well, what I was going to say is that she lives in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So without Second Amendment Foundation and the McDonald case, she probably wouldn't have a gun in Chicago, number
Absolutely.
one. And then I think the other lesson to learn is we all need a shower gun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But here's what I found. I found all too sadly common.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that she persevered through it because the article continues. I've owned that firearm for multiple years. Now I'm sure. Now, how far back did that case go that you mentioned?
McDonald was 2011. Yeah.
Okay, very well could be. And she says the first time I've actually ever used it was that night. The first and only time I've ever used it, said the woman. I didn't want anything to happen to them. I would rather it happen to me before something happens to them.
Wow.
Right. The woman said she did not know the suspect, and the entire incident has left her shaken up.
No doubt.
Right, no doubt. It's unreal. Like, I'm a mom. I'm not a single mom, but I have a husband who works a lot, right? And the reality is, my kids have all grown up around firearms. They're all very proficient, safe, fantastic shots. They know how to handle a firearm safely. They know they have that healthy respect for it, all of that. And I still have, and I carry, obviously, and I even carry within my home most of the time as well. But the reality is, if you think about this, these things, we don't get to decide when these encounters happen. We don't get to determine the time and to be ready, right? There's not a buzzer or beep that goes off that we draw on, right? So the reality is, you never know. You're home for the night, getting ready to go to bed.
There you go.
Well, couldn't she have just said to the guy coming through the window, "Will you hold on a second, because I got to get to my gun safe,
Right.
get my gun out,
Right.
and put it together."
Go make a sandwich. I'll be right back.
Wait a second.
You get something to drink, make a sandwich. I'll be right back. Right.
Yeah, John, you and I were talking about how the defensive gun uses in the nation don't get talked about nearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't mention it enough. You see it in the NRA's magazine. There's a couple other places. That's one of the reasons we want to have this segment every single week, is to highlight, especially some mom and her daughters taking a shower, and somebody tries to break in their home,
Coming in through a window.
It's so scary, so offensive. I'm glad that she was able to defend herself.
Absolutely. And the article states that he had made a statement that he had a gun he was going to shoot. The article doesn't follow up on that or say, did he have. We don't know. We don't know what he had or if anything at all, and that's honestly irrelevant.
Yeah.
Totally legal and justified shoot.
Yeah.
And scary.
Between 1 million and 3 million times per year, somebody uses a firearm in some way to stop themselves from some kind of violent crime.
And I guarantee you that number is not completely accurate by any means, because I imagine how many here in California we can't defensively display, but there are many states that allow a defensive display. I bet you those aren't even reported.
There you go.
Well,
awesome. Thank you so much. Where did that come from?
So that was an article that came from, if you would like to follow up on it, or if anybody would like to look it up, it was from the Chicago WGN Channel 9.
Yeah, and this just happened. I mean, this is just like a month or two old. It's not, so it didn't happen 15 years ago. It just happened.
Nope.
Okay, deployment. This is where we need you. And this is brought by Red, White, and Badass Brew Coffee. Our buddy Dustin. Go to rwbbcoffee.com. So that's rwbbcoffee.com. Use code GOR for 15% off, and you're going to get some really, really good coffee from a local guy right here in San Diego. In fact, he lives in CNT. Check out their brew. It helps support Gun Owners Radio, and Dustin's just a fantastic gun owner. He's a member of San Diego County Gun Owners, and he's got some of the best coffee I've ever had. Particularly, check out their Whiskey Business is probably my favorite. Check out Whiskey Business. So that's Red, White, and Badass Brew at rwbbcoffee.com. So that's two B's, rwbbcoffee.com. Red, White, Badass Brew. And again, GOR, 15% off. Again, put the dough back and donate. Second Amendment Foundation. If you haven't donated by now, take the time right now. Donate. Go to saf.org/individual. Give them a couple of bucks. Show them that you care. Show them that the Gun Owners Radio crowd wants to help when it comes to Second Amendment. So Intro to Off-Grid Communications class was a huge success. Happened yesterday. It's sold out. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. I think it's great that it's sold out. This was John, a ham class. You ever done any ham radio? No, me either. I haven't either.
I wanted to go. Darn it, my kid was getting married. The ham radio class. I had a decision to make. It was tough.
Really? So you skipped the wedding?
Absolutely.
I wanted to show up with a big plate of pineapple. So it could be pineapple and ham. I thought that would be funny. No one else thought it was funny. So stay tuned. We're looking at November dates. We're going to have another one because it was so successful. I'm to be honest with you, and by the way, thank you so much to John Baldwin. Mm-hmm. John Baldwin is one of our board members. He taught it and did an outstanding job. Everybody that signed up, John, got a ham radio, got training, and they're on their way to.
It's pre-programmed for all the stuff that they need for Cineo.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? And that was all. John Baldwin, man. Thank you so much. So check it out. Check out November. I was a little surprised. I didn't realize how much interest there was, but we were getting interest from Riverside County, from Orange County. People were writing us saying, "Hey, I want to go." Mm-hmm. Good for you guys. Volunteer opportunities, go to stcgo.org/volunteer. We have a lot of tabletops coming up between now and the election. Tabletops are fun. We do them year round every year. But I got to tell you, right now is the time. We're getting every voter guide you get into the hands of a potential voter is that important. All these races that we're looking at, they're going to be tight, particularly the Kevin Faulkner race. He's running for supervisor. That will change the landscape for us immensely, and it's going to come down to a handful of votes. I mean, it's going to be so close. So please go to stcgo.org/volunteer, and thank you so much to all the volunteers. I got a cool story. A guy donated some money off of, occasionally we say, hey, here's some of the things we're working on. If you could donate and help us, that'd be great. And he wasn't a member, and he donated some money. And he emailed and he said, hey, I see you're trying to get to a goal. If you don't make it, by whatever, I think it was Sunday night, let me know. And so I wrote him back and I said, hey, we didn't quite make it. He goes, great, I got you covered. And he helped us make the goal. And I was like, wow, that's really generous. I'd love to talk to you because he wasn't a member, Long story short is, wonderful guy, had a great conversation. He wants to get more involved. He went to Poway Weapons and Gear and was training his daughter, and one of our tabletops was there. And he said, your guys at the tabletop were so nice and generous and kind to my daughter that I thought, well, I got to get involved with these guys.
Our community is a great group of people.
Right?
Yeah.
And our tabletop guys are so wonderful. Yep. We really are truly the cream of the crop. So don't forget to go out and vote. Okay, with that, we're ready. Let's do the bumper again, and then we're going to talk to Sam the Gunman, my nephew. So, John, my nephew is 25, and for about 6 years now, we've had him on the radio since he was 19 in a segment called Stump My Nephew. And people write in. Oh, yeah. We're going to have you ask him the question. Not yet, not quite yet.
It's yourself. Don't say it out loud yet.
People write questions in, and we ask them to him on the radio. And if they stump him, they get a cool prize. But hardly anyone stumps him. And these are not easy questions. So he has never heard the question. So, Sam, are you there?
Yep. You guys hear me?
I can hear you, man. Oh, wait a minute. Some technical difficulties. Okay, Sam, you there?
Yeah.
All right, bud. Okay, we're still working on some of the technical stuff. We are so happy to have you on the show. So let's see.
Okay.
First off, this segment is sponsored by Seal One, seal1.com. Seal One is the premier cleaner when it comes to guns, and it doesn't smell bad. Seal One makes gun ownership easier and smell better. Go to a shop, ask them for Seal One, buy it. If they don't have it, ask them why. And also check them out at seal1.com. And thank you guys so much. Seal One, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for sponsoring Gun Owners Radio and doing so much to help the community. So, Sam the Gunman, are you ready for this week's question? Yeah? Did we lose him?
Yes, we did. Oh, it's not coming through.
Oh, hold on, guys. My apologies. We're still working out some of the technical quirks here with our new location. I think we got Sam back now. We got him? All right. Sam gave us a thumbs up. All right. Attorney John Howard, Second Amendment mensch. And gentlemen, go ahead and ask Sam the question.
Sam, What long gun?
Tell him who the question's from.
Well, yes. Jake from State Farm asks, with his khakis, what long gun does the British Royal Guard use, and what's its caliber?
Do we lose him?
I think we lost him. Oh.
Well, now he's going to have time to look it up on Wikipedia.
No, wait. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to call
Really
him.
lose him?
Yeah.
Oh, there he's back.
There he is.
Sam's back.
Hello?
All right, here we go again.
What are you wearing?
So, can everybody hear him?
Yeah.
All right, Sam, you ready for this? So, all right, go ahead. John's going to ask you the question one more time. It's from Jake from State Farm. I don't know why Jake from State Farm. I guess he's a listener. That's great. So, go ahead, John.
Okay, what long gun does the British Royal Guard use, and what's its caliber?
Yeah, what long gun does the British Royal Guard use, and what is its caliber?
Jake from State Farm. Thanks very much for writing in, Jake.
He sounds hideous, by the way.
Well, he's a guy, so. What long arm do the British Royal Guards use, and in what caliber? Now, full disclosure, I have not been to the United Kingdom, so I have not seen this firsthand, but I have seen photographs. The British Royal Guard, colloquially known as the Beefeaters for their hats, and, well, no, the hats are named after the guys. Whatever, I'll get to that later. The long and the short of it is that they use, as far as I've seen, they use the same standard service rifle as the rest of the British Army, that being the L85A2 in caliber 5.56 NATO. The L85 has gone through a couple of revisions. The first ones really didn't work out so well. So they had to be basically completely rebuilt from the receiver up into a fully reliable platform. But they work now, well, hopefully anyway. And that's, as far as I'm aware, that's what they use.
Okay, so the L85, he wrote that it's the SA-80.
Yeah, SA-80 refers to the family of small arms from which the L85 service rifle and the L86 light support weapon are both derived. They're the same receiver. The main difference is that the L86 has a longer, heavier barrel and a bipod.
Right, it's same. And talk a little bit about what the SA-80 is in general. It's what's it comparable to? Describe it a little bit.
Well, SA-80 was the name of the project, Small Arms 1980. The idea was that the British military wanted to replace their aging L1A1 SLRs, which are inch pattern FALs, and they wanted a bullpup configuration in a smaller caliber with selective fire capability. And they went through a number of revisions. There were several prototypes over the course of a few decades, but really where the SA-80, yeah, it is a bullpup. The action is behind the pistol grip and trigger group. The original prototypes were AR-18s basically chopped up and rebuilt backwards. The original L85s, well, the original SA-80s, I should say, were designed by a team that had very limited experience in firearms. They were engineers. They knew what they were doing with regards to mechanical engineering, but they did not specialize in firearms. So early L85s and L86s had a lot of reliability problems, especially in harsh conditions.
I think H&K actually stepped up and said, "Here, we're going to fix this," right?
Yeah, pretty famously. But it's a little bit less weird than it sounds because HK was at the time owned by the same parent company as, I think, British Aerospace. So it wasn't like just some random company out of the blue. There was a reason that they chose HK to do it.
I didn't know that.
But from what I've heard, the newer ones are mostly reliable.
Yeah. What do you think, John?
I'm blown away.
Yeah. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
How did you not know that? Everybody knows that. That's just common knowledge. Amazing work. He does this every week. He does this every week. I'm almost kind of numb to it. It's actually really interesting when we have somebody in who's never really heard it before. like the reaction. It's like, you almost forget how amazing all the stuff he knows is. So good job, Sam. Awesome job as always. Fantastic work. And anything else you got for us?
Oh, actually, real quick, I have a book that mentions the SA-80. Let me grab it right now.
Oh, look at that.
Well, while you have him on, why don't you ask him what 1,426,000 times 4,225 is?
Can you see
He
it?
probably knows it. Thornycroft. Oh, look
I
at
haven't
that.
read this cover to cover yet, but it is Thornycroft to SA-80, British Bullpup Firearms, 1901 through 2020 by Jonathan S. Ferguson. And so
Just a
that
casual
covers,
reading.
Light
Just had it
reading.
laying around.
yeah, it's a little bit. And that covers not just the developmental history of the SA-80 family, but of the bullpup concept in British military service more broadly.
Nice job. You got a blog coming
Amazing.
up? You got an article?
Yep, next blog post will be about magazines. Not really an exciting topic, but
Like
I try to make
Cosmo
it
and-
exciting.
Boys Life, or what kind of magazines are we talking?
More PMags, but sure, I can cover that too if you want. I guess.
All right, PMAX, is that coming up tomorrow, or when's that going to come up?
Yep, that's coming up bright and early tomorrow morning, or as we call it in my time zone, afternoon.
Awesome job. Well, great, man. Awesome job. Thank you, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me on, as always.
Yep. See you next week.
That's amazing.
Sam.
See you next week.
Yeah, dude's 25.
I'm just blown away. That
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a random question.
I know.
He,
Well, my favorite random question, we've talked about this before, was, and I don't even recall the context of how it came up, but he knew the history behind the glass slipper with Cinderella.
Yeah.
Like that came up randomly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he came right up with the history of why. And
we were talking about something. I think I jokingly asked him, I was like, why is it even a glass? Like, somehow it came up. And he said, oh, well, actually, it comes, I think it was a German word where
Yeah.
glass and fur are very similar.
Yeah, it was
so it was
like a
actually a mistaken
mistranslation.
translation. I'm like, why do you know that?
That's okay.
It's my nephew, and he's been doing this since he was 19. It's not like he's even getting better. He was just this good when he was 19. So listen, I got an article I wanted to talk about real quick here. The FBI stealth edits crime stats, obliterates Democrat and media talking point, revises 2.1 decrease into an actual 4.5 increase in violent crime. So there's been this narrative that violent crime has decreased, particularly under Biden and with all these new. I don't know how would you describe these laws, John, where it's like, hey, no one goes to jail anymore. You know, like I don't know how to really describe what these laws are, but they're certainly less. They're far more lenient on crime.
Well, it's a good way to reduce crime statistics. I said that to some friend of mine who was talking about crime statistics and redefining certain crimes. And I said, well, look, you want to reduce crime? I've got a big solution for you: legalize murder. I mean, then you've reduced crime because
right.
it's not a crime anymore.
Think of it.
I mean, are
there
you
wouldn't
kidding?
be a single prosecution.
So who would do that? I mean,
well,
How do you? I gotta tell
but
you.
Californians are voted for that. That wasn't even the legislature.
I got to tell you, in a nation that I haven't even gotten to the article yet, but in a nation this size, and someone, I'm very, very interested in, passionate about liberty and freedom. And I guess where I'm going is I'm all for criminal justice reform. I think that if you're liberty minded, if you're small government minded, and you live in the United States, looking at how many people we have in jail, there's clearly an issue. But the way they're going about criminal justice reform now is completely and totally wrong. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that statement that I just made?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I just tell you a story. When the FBI set General Flynn up and entrapped him, and he was going down pretty hard in court, I called a friend of mine here in San Diego who is, I would say, relatively radically to the left, and he's a criminal defense lawyer, one of the best ever in San Diego. And I said, take off your political hat and tell me if you agree with me that was entrapment. And he said, well, yeah. It's not even a question. He said, but John, you got to understand something. This happens to my clients every single day. And I thought about that, and I thought, I need to put my money where my mouth is here, because I don't want one human being to spend one moment in jail if he's not guilty.
Yeah, whether they're a general or agree with you on politics or not, whatever.
It's a moment of time you'll never get back.
Yes.
And let alone 20 years. And so I made it a pro bono project of our firm to support the Innocence Project and do some work for them.
Oh, wow.
And now they're a relatively left-wing group, but my feeling was that what they're trying to do is make sure that people who are innocent are not in jail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important value. So we did that. By the way, I don't want to get into politics particularly, but...
Hey, it's a political show. Go for it.
I happened to mention something about, and this is several years ago, this is before she was a candidate for president, I mentioned Kamala Harris, and they all went silent on the other side of the table. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I would have thought they'd like her. She's a Democrat, a liberal Democrat. And they said, no, we hate her. She said, look, when she was Attorney General, she did everything she could to keep us from getting innocent people out of jail.
Yep.
And she did everything, once we got them out of jail, she did everything she could to keep them from getting compensated. And I'm thinking, by God, if we put somebody in jail wrongfully, you did that in my name as a citizen, then we better, first of all, get them out. And then second, compensate them for what we did to them. And you can't. You'll never give them that year back.
Well, I think objectively, there's no case to be made when it comes, other than President Trump is the criminal justice reform candidate for president right now, particularly compared to Kamala Harris. She is absolutely the other end of the spectrum. She has a horrible record when it comes to ethics. When it comes to prosecution ethics is maybe the term. I don't know. Maybe there's a better term, but she's actually done all kinds of horrible things. Put people in jail when they shouldn't have been there. Kept them in jail when they had evidence to the contrary. So it just baffles me that Trump isn't getting more support from. It's really interesting that he's not getting more support from people that are interested in criminal justice reform, from groups like, that are anti-drinking, like moms against drunk drivers and dads against drunk drivers and students against drinking. The guy doesn't drink at all. I mean, it's really interesting how, I don't know, groups that claim to, be all for one or the other subject, how they base their support on other things. And it's too bad. But
I think a lot of it, too, is they're uninformed. I think a lot of the things that you're stating and the facts that you're stating, the things that she did, I think a lot of people are unaware.
They just don't even know.
They don't know. They're not correlating her to that.
And people probably don't even know. Like when I say that Trump's actually done things for criminal justice reform, they probably don't even know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me get to this article though. The FBI has quietly edited the crime statistics for 2022 after initially stating in September of 2023 that crime, particularly violent crime, was down 2.1% overall. In the months since that number was first released, Democrats and media talking heads have wielded it like a sledgehammer to crush Republican claims that crime is on the rise. But the stealth edit, which was somehow not monitored in a September 2024 press release from the Bureau, undercuts their argument. This, by the way, is from dailywire.com. Real Clear Politics co-founder and president Tom Bevan shared an analysis of the revision, saying in an X post, which is a Twitter post, I kind of wish he hadn't changed the name. Nobody knows what X is. In an X post, guess what? Crime isn't down 2.1% according to the FBI. They just released a stealth edit update. Violent crime is actually up 4.5%, which again, when I kicked this little segment off, I think it's I think this criminal justice reform is criminal justice reform in name only. And really what it is we're going to coddle people that are having, serious impacts on people's everyday lives by causing horrible violent crime. And like you said, well, we're just not going to call it violent crime, or we're just not going to arrest for it, And then they do, like in California, there's Prop 36.
Yep.
Prop 36 should be passing with an
Overwhelmingly.
overwhelming majority. And my understanding is, I think you and I were talking about how it's hurting right now. They're not even positive it's going to pass.
I'm told that it's not. It was 20 points ahead, and now it's neck and neck. And I just can't imagine why anybody would vote to say that it's okay to steal $950.
Yeah. What do you think the solution is, John? What do we do?
Recriminalize it and arrest people. I mean, you know, the broken windows theory did work.
We're talking,
James Q. Wilson,
up in New York. What's his name? Used it in New York. And
Mayor
Giuliani used in New York. Tell people what the broken windows theory was.
Broken windows theory was written by actually a friend of mine named James Q. Wilson. He was a professor, had done some work, and one of the things that he found was if you had, and this was an experiment they did, if you had a neighborhood and you left a broken window, a window was broken. It didn't take very long for it to begin the entire neighborhood to start to deteriorate. They actually tested it out several places, and they also tested it with what happens when there is a broken window and it's immediately fixed. And the theory really was that if you go after the small infractions and crimes and the bigger ones don't happen and the deterioration doesn't happen. It's an interesting theory. I actually saw it play out in my own neighborhood. Interestingly enough, I lived in Mission Hills for a time in a beautiful neighborhood, and they were trying to put in new, very well kept, and they were trying to put in new plumbing systems. So they had all these pipes along the street, which then gathered dirt and debris, and all of a sudden the whole neighborhood started to decline. Just because, for whatever reason, people weren't taking care of their properties as much anymore. Anyway, Wilson came up with the theory, and it proved to be true. Giuliani said, "You know what? We're going to arrest you we're going to give you a ticket for jaywalking." And nobody did that, but they did, and all of a sudden, crime starts to go down because they think, "Geez, if they're going to arrest me for that, then
what else are you going to do to me for other things?"
You maintain camp discipline,
right?
Otherwise, everyone turns into a savage,
right?
Well, I don't know. I got to tell you, I thought it was interesting, and it's. I don't know what happened with the FBI. I'm not sure why things were off. I certainly hope it wasn't political, but it definitely was being used against. You know, and they break it down to Republican versus Democrat in a lot of ways. That's really was the breakdown. But this idea of, hey, you can't stop crime by just not calling it crime anymore. It still happens. It still exists. People are still affected by it. Statistics, we're not trying to improve statistics. We're using statistics to judge the things we're trying to improve. So, it's just ridiculous.
Well, you know what Mark Twain said about that, right? They're lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I don't, anybody who lives in a major city in the United States of America and is sensate knows that crime was going up. So the only people who apparently didn't know that was the FBI, which then leads to the conclusion perhaps that they aren't in cities or sensate. But at least they've come up with the right numbers now, and maybe that'll get out.
Hopefully
people
take
understand.
some of that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it is, these efforts are not working. Next story on the San Diego Board of Supervisors. So a couple of weeks ago, this was kind of interesting. I got a call from Jim Desmond's office. He's on the County Board of Supervisors. And of course, Joel Anderson is also on the County Board of Supervisors. And they said, hey, something's coming up on the agenda we want you to take a look at. And barely got any notice, but turned it around pretty quick, put out a press release. And I wanted to tell you the story of exactly what happened. Tera Lawson Remer, who we talked about a little earlier, she's been on the county board for just almost 4 years now. She was elected in the last 2 elections ago, 4-year term. And for those who don't know, the County Board of Supervisors is the city council for the county. That's primarily what they do. And nobody knew what the heck they did. Nobody knew anything about them until COVID. And then all of a sudden, emergency services, health services, that sort of thing became real important. And right around that time, right just before COVID, they had what do you call it when you limit how many times someone can run for office? They had
term limits.
Holy cow. They had term limits. So some of the old guard in the county board were leaving. Some of the new folks were coming on. So people started to realize that, hey, you know what? This county board thing's pretty important. And the new guard were even doing things like passing gun laws. Well, Tera Lawson Remer is not good at her job. And I don't think that is a hard case to make. I don't think that's an outlandish claim. And every Republican out there believes it. But what gives it
How
more...
would we know? She never shows up.
Exactly.
You're not wrong.
And it's not just Republicans. Democrats are turning against her too. And when I say she's not good at her job, yeah, I disagree with her political positions. But, you know, you were just talking about how she never shows up. She doesn't go to these meetings. She doesn't do her job well. The skill it takes, we're not even talking about her decisions that she makes, but the skill that it takes to do her job, she's not good at. You don't have to be good at your job to show up, you know? I mean, just show up. So she's really, really bad at this, and she's running for re-election, and she's starting to feel the heat. We have a really good candidate running against her, a guy named Kevin Faulconer. So she's trying everything, and she is a zealot when it comes to being anti-gun. I don't mean that she just kind of votes when it comes that way. I mean that she actually spearheads and champions anti-gun initiatives. She's attacked our organization. She's really horrible when it comes to guns. She's really bad at her job. She's really horrible. She's running for re-election. She might be losing. All that ended up with this desperate piece of, you know, regulation that she tried to pass, where basically she wanted to punish gun shops by making sure they couldn't bid on contracts from law enforcement. So, for example, if a law enforcement, like San Diego PD, for example, if they wanted to buy 100 ARs, they could put it out there. Hey, gun shops, we're looking for 100 ARs as long as they, you know, fit these specifications. And these gun shops could, you know, put in a bid and say, hey, we'll sell you the 100 ARs for X amount of money and whatever. So she decided, hey, we're going to show just how anti-gun I am by punishing these gun shops and basically demonizing them and villainizing them and making them sound like they're all horrible people. And put this regulation would have put a bunch of hoops that they'd have to jump through that were basically impossible. You couldn't live up to the standards that they were putting forth. One in particular was violations. They said, hey, these gun shops can't have any violations. Well, a violation is not breaking the law. A violation could be something as minor as, hey, you guys didn't hang a sign in your break room like you should have. That's a violation. That's a demerit, you know? Or on the form, the 4473, somebody corrected me. That's right? 4473?
Federal.
Yeah, that's the federal forms, 4473.
Right.
Somebody
Yes.
corrected me. I think I said it wrong in one of the meetings. So on the 4473, somebody could have, you know, capitalized or misspelled their name or something like that. Some kind of minor little like, hey, we found this. You're not breaking the law here, but it's a violation.
And we do get audited.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that there's not a shop in the nation that doesn't have a violation.
Absolutely. You're right.
Everybody has a violation, and you're not breaking the law.
Right.
We're so heavily regulated. Gun shops are so heavily regulated. If you're breaking the law, you're out. You know, you're done. So she tried to conflate those two things, so that a violation meant that you were some kind of nefarious, horrible person in this regulation. So we put out in our press release that, hey, you know, there's all kinds of ways around this. It's clearly not going to be helpful. For example, you know, like if I have an FFL and I have 47 violations, I could actually just go open a second FFL and it would have no violations, and I could use that FFL for nothing but law enforcement transaction. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. All she was trying to do is, hey, look at me, I'm doing something, I'm anti-gun, vote for me. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. On the day, last Tuesday, that she was trying to get this thing passed, she also started futzing with some policy on the Tijuana River. Well, her district doesn't bump up. It doesn't include the Tijuana River. That's Supervisor Nora Vargas. And Nora Vargas started going, wait a minute, you didn't consult me? What are you doing in my district? You know, like she's really bad at her job. So you know what Nora Vargas did? She stepped all over her Tijuana River thing. And then when it came time to vote on this gun shop thing, Nora Vargas got up and left. She just left. She left the dais. I guess she stacked all of Tera Lawson Remer's stuff towards the end of the meeting. And then when it became that time, she just left.
Walked out.
Just that's it. So the vote was 2-2 and it didn't pass. It didn't pass. This is how horrible. And Nora Vargas is a left-wing Democrat. Like Nora Vargas and Tera Lawson Remer, you would think on paper would get along. But Tera Lawson Remer is so bad at her job that she can't even get along with people that agree with her 100%. So that's what's going on with the Board of Supervisors. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? What we have is an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to get her out of office, get Kevin in office, and start getting some real decisions made.
Still soaking that in.
The what?
That's like right up there with leaving a penny for your server. Like that's insult to injury. That's worse than a no vote.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Just disrespectfully get up and leave.
Yep.
You're not even worth my time. And I think she went to a Padres game. I think she was actually, I think she honestly, like on her social media, took a picture of herself at a Padres game like an hour later or something like that. So. Anyway.
A whole lot better than, or a whole lot more important than voting on an initiative by Tera Lawson Remer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And more fun.
Really quickly, we do have a super chat to thank. Mike White.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your donation of $10. Everybody, while you're donating, please give to our friends at California Gun Rights Foundation, CGF. Don't forget to give them $10, give them $50, whatever you can afford. Go to cagunrights.org/contribute. Remember, we're trying to put the dough back and donate. That ends the show. Thank you so much for joining us, John Howard. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Alicia, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And Rich and Matt, you guys did a bang-up job. And, of course, thanks to Sam the Gunman. So check us out. Don't forget, join if you're not a member of San Diego County Gun Owners. Get on our email list by going to gunownersradio.com if you're not already there. And thank you guys so much for listening and following. Don't forget to share us on social media and spread the word. Thanks for watching this episode from Gun Owners Radio. If you're watching mainstream media, you're not getting the truth about guns and the Second Amendment. Gun Owners Radio is the easiest way to stay on top of the Second Amendment fight, the fight for your self-defense rights. You can watch our live stream on YouTube every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, or if you're in San Diego, AM 1170, FM 96.1, The Answer. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform. Just do a search for Gun Owners Radio and you'll find our show. Don't forget to support our sponsors. Click on the links in the show notes and support the businesses that support your Second Amendment rights. Like and subscribe to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.